welcome back to the Don and Gino Real Estate and Finance Show right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.
And remember, our goal is always to guide you to personal and financial wellness.
Well, happy Saturday and welcome back to the Don and Gino Real Estate and Finance Show right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. We love spending our Saturdays with you every Saturday, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., sharing with you what you need to know, want to know, should know about real estate, finance, and so much more. And we do that by bringing in top professionals. Our input after between us are 50 some odd years experience in lending and real estate and finance, as well as our experts. And you know, after this week's market correction, we're going to call it, a lot of you will hear it's called the market crash, but it's more of a market correction in the stock market. We brought on prophetically and timely Mr. Chris Ingram with Ingram Financial Solutions on the show today to talk about what's going on in the market. And unfortunately for Chris, this is now the third time in 7 years that Chris just happens to be on our show right after a market correction or crash, if you want to call it. I think this thing works for us. What do you think, Chris?
It seems like I need to stop coming on the show because every time I'm scheduled for the show, people lose money the day before. So, yeah.
So there's that, right? There's the loss of money, but you know, not everybody loses money. So it's a good market for some. Some people had short positions. So I know that that's not the norm, but some people are always making money. So it just depends on how you're positioned and what your plans are, what your goals are. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about that. It has a lot to do with your time horizon, too. I mean, this is just a blip on the radar. And for some, this is a great opportunity.
Well, the main reason I love having you on right after these happen, because, again, you handle our finance and stuff, and you didn't get panic calls from us. But the beautiful thing having you on the show right after a market correction or a crash, whatever you want to call it for some, is that you bring some calmness with education and knowledge and so forth, because this can be very emotional for a lot of people.
Right.
And that's what I think you're going to see a lot of the volatility right now. So we'd love to get your insight of what you've seen, where we're going, you know, strategies, what to think of, those type of things from a financial advisor's point of view.
You know, I think there's a couple of things to keep in mind is that emotion that you talk about. It's funny how emotional people get when you get just 2 days of a market pulling back. I mean, we've had months and months and months of the market going out. You get 2 days of a pullback, and I mean, the sky is falling all of a sudden. And I think the media is partially to blame for that. I was just going
to say, that's the media.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you know, even my wife last night, I was sitting upstairs and I heard her call down from downstairs. Wait a second, the Dow had its biggest point drop ever, or I don't even think she said point drop, its biggest drop ever. I'm like, no. That's kind of how everybody's taking it, but it had its biggest point drop, but it didn't have its biggest percentage drop, and it's not the biggest drop it's ever had. And so people need to start kind of realizing where we are. You know, the
That's
Dow.
the media.
Yeah, but you know, when the Dow was at 10,000, this point drop would have been much more significant. But now we're at 25,000, so that point drop doesn't have as big of an impact on the overall market.
1,100 is the new 400.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
And so you got to kind of realize that we're dealing in percentages here. We're not dealing in points. And that's the media spinning it to make that dramatic headline that everybody's going to tune in or read.
It's a big number, though. It is a big number. When you see that, you're like, woo.
It is. I mean, what, 4% drop? That's a big percentage drop.
But you see 1,100, over 1,000 points. That's dramatic for a lot of people that don't understand the percentage situation. But you look at that number, you're like, wow, that's a big number.
Right. But you also want to look at people, and this is the conversation I've had with some people, and go, well, you know, I know you're nervous, but you still have more money than you did on December 31st.
Right.
You know,
that's actually key.
The market went up. I mean, the S&P was up something like 6.5% in the month of January. And yes, you've given back the majority of that, but hey, we're still not where we were when we ended last year. I mean,
and you were happy with that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that, right? Everybody was super stoked where they were on December 31st. Oh, it's had a great year.
Dude, I looked at my number and go, how'd that happen?
Right.
Honestly, because I don't worry about it that much. We monitor it. We check our, you know, where we should go. We've made some moves this year, actually good ones, thank you. And I didn't worry about it. And when I saw the number, I'm like, That's even better than I even hoped for.
It's kind of a true story for me too, and I'm a little more acutely aware than Don is. I watch it more than he does, but I was
For
like,
sure.
I thought we skimmed our profits. Where did all those come from?
Right, right.
It was nice.
Well, and I met with a client last week, and I showed her accounts, and she was like, "Oh, I didn't realize I had so much money," because she doesn't follow it, and a year rattles off, and a year where you're making 20+% on a decent sized portfolio, you're like, "Oh my gosh, I have a couple of $100,000 I didn't know I had."
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good problem to have. But
Yeah, no doubt.
It's called a nice vacation.
A nice house, a second home.
If you can spend that on a vacation, there's a problem.
Not all of it, just a little bit. Just
Right.
take a little bit.
Right. But this
Yeah, where are you
pullback-
going, Gino?
I'm like,
I'm running.
a couple $100,000 on
You'll
a
be
vacation.
gone for a year?
I hope I'm invited.
Touche.
Yeah, not that crazy, but I think obviously the other thing that everybody gets wrapped up in is it just going to spiral out of control?
Right.
And so that's where you start to get past all that emotional nonsense that starts right off the bat. And that's where you start to actually dig into the numbers and say, okay, so let's start talking about what is actually going on. How is it going to affect you near term, long term? Do we care, or is there something we should be doing differently to make those adjustments? And so that's where we get to the nuts and bolts of managing people's wealth, is then breaking down, okay, now that we've gotten past the fact that it was a crazy wild ride for 2 days, let's start figuring out where to go from here and what the right answer and place to move is.
All right, so if you just tuned into the Don and Gino Real Estate and Finance Show every Saturday, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. for over 7 years now, and we brought on, if you hear that very calm voice, you've heard it many times, over a dozen times on our show for a reason. He's one of our financial advisors and guru, as we call him, and we always happen to bring Chris on right after there's market corrections or crashes. So we have Chris Ingram on with Ingram Financial Solutions, helping to kind of wrap all this up that you've seen. What's nice, it's Saturday now, so we got to kind of see a little bit of how this is playing out and get Chris's input and view of it to help you kind of handle this emotional roller coaster that we just saw.
Yeah, but just to touch on that, the nice thing is that Chris is here, and he is calm, and he can be here because he's not freaking out. I mean, there was times in this market years before where you'd have a crash like we saw earlier this year, and everybody was like, people in New York were committing suicide. People, I mean, we didn't see any of that this time around.
Well, we should also touch on in the next segment what a crash and a correction is.
Okay.
Well, that's huge.
And start getting people to understand the difference between the two, because corrections are healthy, they need to happen, and they're not long-term in nature, and so you can benefit from using them as an opportunity and not panicking. Crashes are a whole different scenario that you want to reposition yourself and make sure you're doing something slightly different to protect yourself.
So to touch on something that's kind of interesting that I've been thinking about, and the difference between asset classes and the types of investments we make, you'll hear over and over and over again that real estate's the best investment you could ever make.
Mm-hmm.
I started thinking about that, and one of them, of course, is you have an opportunity to leverage, right? That's one of the reasons real estate's a great long-term investment. But the other thing I thought about recently is it's because it's not liquid. So fear can't come into real estate as easily as it can come into the stock market.
Yeah.
So even if you're feeling nervous, you can't just up and sell your house in 15 minutes. It just doesn't happen. You can't call someone and say sell it and then it's gone.
Right.
Actually,
maybe right now you
can.
probably could.
I'm about
Yeah.
to say, right now you could. If
Yeah.
you're in the right market,
Yeah.
you can say, I want to sell my home. Sold!
At the right price, just
Yeah,
like
yeah,
anything else with
exactly.
supply and demand.
And we
Right.
talked about that in one of our videos recently.
But at the same time, so you think about that, and so maybe that's one of the things that real estate has going for it, is that it's not easy, it's not as liquid, so it has less volatility. That's why you see runs of 6, 7, 8 years without a correction, versus in the stock market, we see a lot more up and down.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And you also don't get an account statement. So, unless you...
You can't log in and see where it's
unless
at.
you're like checking Zillow on a regular basis, you're not getting an update on a regular basis.
Oh, some of our clients do.
One, I know, and unfortunately Zillow has done that, and
Yep.
online has done that. But typically, you're not checking it on a regular basis, so you're not. And,
Yeah.
and how often do you see a headline on from the media that, oh my God, real estate prices, dove
Dropped
today.
10%
Yeah, right.
today.
So
Right.
the media also doesn't have a hold of it to kind of,
Yeah,
pull
Zillow's
up
not going to
people's
show your home
heartstrings.
valued at 500,000 yesterday, and today it's going to be valued at 450.
No.
It just
And
won't ever
have you ever
happen.
logged on to Zillow and had a big red flashing warning across the sign like real estate prices are dropping?
Yeah.
So
Not
it's
gonna
not.
happen.
Yeah,
No.
it's not as much.
Yeah, and Zillow's, just so you know, we're going to close the segment. Zillow is not the best place to get your advice.
There you
Just
go.
so you know, it's a marketing company. All right, so we got great information coming from Chris Ingram from Ingram Financial Solutions in regard to what's going on with this volatile market. We'll just put it that way. But we're going to go in the next segment and explain the difference between a crash versus a correction. Remember, if you've seen some of our videos, we were just talking about we saw it coming. Is it healthy or not? We'll find out with Chris Ingram when we come back to the Don and Gino Real Estate and Finance Show.